Hey guys, what's up? It is week 327. I have some reviews for you, of course. Probably going to be a little shorter than I am normally. I'm a little tired, got a lot to do this weekend. But first up is from Radiance Films, and this is A Moment of Romance from 1990. This is a Hong Kong action flick, action romance kind of deal. Yeah, and this is a first time watch for me. Johnny 2 did this one, and he did a couple other ones. I actually think that he did the Running on Empty, if I'm not mistaken. Running on Time, I can't remember the movie. Arrow put it out. Pretty solid movie. Actually shares one of the same cast members here. So what this follows is kind of a getaway driver criminal, and he really didn't want to do the job. It's kind of a job he gets pulled into, and his like older brother kind of wants him in. I'm not sure if it's actually his brother or like his kind of guy in charge is he shows respect to. I believe they might actually be related. So he does this, and of course it doesn't go as smoothly as they would like to hope. It's actually a really awesome kind of opening bank robbery heist kind of deal, and he ends up taking a hostage. Now he drives away and gets away and separates from the gang. If you guys ever seen like Driver or Drive and that kind of Baby Driver and stuff, and like you kind of get the idea, like that kind of heist movies where they have the professional driver and everything like that. So he ends up getting away, but he has to take this young girl hostage, and almost immediately they kind of have like a young blossoming romance. And the gang realizes that she's in the car later on, and they say, you got to take her out. They try. He steps up and stops them. Kind of stands off to a guy who's got, obviously like the top dog position in his mind to go over everybody because, the leader of the gang, the head honcho of all these gangs is getting sick, and this guy obviously sees it. From frame one, you see this guy, he's the villain just by his look, his demeanor, and everything. Like I said, this guy's in a lot of movies. You'd recognize him. Very, very memorable face, the villain. So what happens is these like kind of a Romeo and Juliet story, right? They're not supposed to be together. She comes from a rich family that doesn't understand, and he comes from a criminal background, and he's also turning his back on the gang, or a small fraction of the gang, by doing this. And pretty soon the police are after him, the criminals are after him, and he only has revenge on his mind after a couple things that happen. He's really good in this. The leads are both good. I love the romance. I love some of the imagery is beautiful. It's gorgeous. The desolate kind of isolate, like empty kind of streets at the very ending in a wedding gown. Imagery is top notch. There is, like I said, the action is solid, and the ending I love because there's this character who's kind of an old timer everybody kind of pisses on in the gang, and he just like has his corner, and like there's punk kids and everything like that. But what do they call this? Heroic bloodshed. So there's like a small subgenre, not small, but a subgenre in the Hong Kong flicks, and there's actually a really nice special feature about that on here. Pull this up. There is a interview with Benny Chang in Love and Danger, Hong Kong cinema through a moment of romance, a new visual essay by critic and Asian expert David Dresser. And that was really interesting because this guy has a lot of insight on the subgenres and goes all the way back to early cinema. Audio commentary by Asian cinema expert Frank Jin, newly translated English subtitles by Dylan Chen, trailer, the kind of stuff like that. And there's a 28-page booklet as well, which is really good. But anyways, I like the special features that added some insight. And they even mentioned, there's this really part in here where they mentioned like kind of like the teen thriller movies, and I was like, oh yeah. And they mentioned Happenings and another one that I covered for 1980, which I put in the kind of thriller horror aspects. And there was a third one too that I was like, they had Love Massacre in there, which came out in 81. So they talked about a bunch of stuff that I had seen and watched for the early 80s stuff, so that was interesting. And they talked about Man on the Brink, which I'm going to look for because I think that's the only one I didn't watch out of the 3 or 4 they showed. But Moment of Romance, I would recommend this from Radiance Films. You could do a lot worse. Okay, the next one here is from Sub Rosa Films, and this is from the early 2000s, and back in the day, like when this kind of stuff was released, I was really into the underground stuff like Tempe and SRS. SRS put out a lot of stuff that had my interest, and this is Binge and Purge, and I had heard about this for years, and I finally getting around to watching it from the kind of the retro kind of release little arm that Sub Rosa does. Now, Binge and Purge is directed by Brian Clement, who did the Meat Market movies, and I've seen the first 2 Meat Markets. There was actually a third one. I don't think it got a wide release in the States, but the first 2 I think Sub Rosa probably put out, and I remember watching those. They were gory, ambitious, low budget. I liked it. I remember enjoying them. Binge and Purge is the director has a new commentary on here. He's basically said, this is my least favorite of the movie. There's so many things I would have done different, yada, yada, yada. And I didn't see this at that age, that 15, 16, 17, which I probably watched like kind of the meat market movies, and I just really kind of enjoyed them at the time. So putting this in, it does share a lot of DNA with meat market in terms of the, the ambition and the gore and all that stuff. This follows a group of models, which it predates a lot of stories. Think Neon Demon, right? These group of models who go around and they basically are cannibals and they eat people, and their bite kind of turns other people into like zombie cannibal things. I'm not really sure. It's a little inept. There's a couple people on the case that remind me of like a Mulder and Scully kind of duo ripoff, and they're after the cannibal model girls, and they're leaving like a trail of bloodshed. I'm not gonna lie, like the acting is really patchy in places here, and the special effects are fun and gory. There's a lot of actual gut munching, intestine munching, and stuff, which it doesn't typically happen. You don't always see that kind of stuff. There's a big kind of set piece at the end. Like I said, a lot of ambition, a lot of shootouts. But for overall, the story is interesting to the point, but it also comes across a little inept, like it's missing a couple of the the transition stuff and all that kind of deal. Overall, it's not my favorite of his movies. I prefer the meat market movies, and there's other ones I do prefer. If you're thinking like early SOV, not even early, but 2000s SOV, early 2000s SOV kind of deal. As far as the special features are concerned, all new commentary track, original commentary track, and new trailer, deleted scenes. Yeah, so if you're into like the real early, like slimy, gory, dirt cheap looking movies, then Binge and Purge is definitely for you. Okay, this next one here from 1975. This is actually a double feature. We'll go over the first one right here. This is The Broken Mirror from Mondo Macabro from, like I said, 1975. And I had not heard about this one. It has Max van Sydow in there, which should pique some people's interest for sure. So I started watching this, and right away I noticed the cinematography was excellent. The composition was excellent. All the frames were it's shot in a beautiful location where all the characters stand. You know what I mean? The composition's really good. You'll have one of the four, one in the front, and you'll have a window in the back. They just frame their shots really well. It's a very like slow paced or methodically paced movie, if that makes sense. There's not a lot of fast cuts or anything like that. This is definitely in your art kind of film, psychological House of Psychotic Women kind of movie, I would call. Psychotic Women, there's that book where they focus on these movies about women losing their minds. This is definitely 100% in that kind of ordeal, fitting right into that classic 70s kind of trope. But so we have this woman who is pregnant, and she's ready to give birth. Max von Sydow is her husband, and her mother-in-law. I think is it her mother-in-law or her actual mother that comes and starts to kind of talk to her and take care of her. But it's like she brings up, I think it's her mother, brings up all these past events that happened where she kind of went missing, and she came back with this painting. So again, we have like art kind of like being this catalyst for horror. It reminds me a lot of Bird with the Crystal Plumage and other things like that. Not in the vein of like a Color Me Blood Red or anything, or Bucket of Blood, but in that vein that the art really is directly connected to the psychosis of the character, which I enjoy that kind of deal. So what happens is she starts to be really hyper focused on this painting, and strange things start to go around because this painting is like kind of the only key she has to her missing memories and the time she kind of disappeared. So she starts to go into it, and these other people, she's seeing people that other people are saying aren't there, and this kind of like castle across the way, and all this kind of deal and everything. It's pretty interesting. When the story does unfold, you're like, oh, that is crazy. It's not anything as, I guess, probably supernatural or like insane as a lot of people were expecting, but there's a couple really good reveals, one of which involves, the paint. I don't want to exactly say anything here, but the ending is very surrealistic, absurdist, kind of bizarre and crazy. Anyways, I think this one's really well acted, well shot. It's not the most approachable movie. Like I said, the pacing probably will turn some people off, but I think this is a really good art film and unique too. There is some special features on here. I want to make sure I get that. Okay, interview with co-writer-director Claude D'Anna, interview with co-writer-director Férid Boughedir, interview with actress co-writer Laura Deschanel, profile of editor and producer Gus Warren, Repels, curtain call, short film by Claude D'Anna. And you got French and English on Broken Mirror, and you only have the French on the other film, The Unquiet Death. So let's get into that one next. Okay, on the same disc is Broken Mirrors, is Unquiet Death. I think if you get the deluxe edition, there's a reversible cover art. So this one, I think, is from 1970, and I did not watch this one for 1970. I watched a bunch of movies for 1970 as a retro year, but this one fit, I guess, with more drama thriller. And I think that I watched movies that were less horror than this one for 1970. So The Unquiet Death, this is a super bizarre film. It opens up in a really kind of gothic style where there's a family together, and their uncle dies in mysterious circumstances, of course, and the butler there, he seems to be bossed around by these three kind of relatives, these female relatives, who are really uppity and snooty. So basically they start to give him weird orders, but eventually the tables flip and the whole thing turns into some weird absurdist kind of nightmare where it doesn't really follow any logic. And I'm not going to lie, it is interesting to a certain extent. It reminds me of that movie Braid that came out a few years ago, except I prefer Braid. This gets kind of really sluggish for me because it's so inept I can't, and sometimes that works for me, but there's no connection for the story, and it's just kind of doing and saying a lot of things of people screaming and yelling, and by the end of it I just was very over Unquiet Death. Now this is going to be made for a certain type of audience, right? I mean, I'm a fan of John Roland and stuff like that. I don't love all his movies, but this one was just too absurdist for me, and it just really never came together. If there were messages, I didn't see them. But then again, sometimes people don't watch movies just for messages at all. They watch it for visuals, and the visuals are good here. They're interesting. Except this one just kind of lost me, to be honest. That is Unquiet Death. Okay, next up is from 1978, and this was put out by Vinegar Syndrome, and I just popped this in. It looked interesting enough to me, and I'd bought it 2 or 3 times, right? And this is Killer's Delight on Blu-ray, aka Sport Kill, aka Dark Ride. It has a bunch of alternate names. There's a couple actors in here I think people will recognize. The biggest one is John Carlin from the House of Dark Shadows, or, Dark Shadows television show, and the movie House of Dark Shadows, and of course Daughter of Darkness, which is a really excellent movie from, is that 71, if I'm not mistaken, Daughter of Darkness? Around that time. That's a very good vampire flick that Blue Underground put on in 4K. So Killer's Delight. This is directly inspired by the Ted Bundy murders. And this is like talking about how this stretch of road that Bundy, the freeway killer, killed a bunch of girls. So it opens up right in the beginning of a guy dumping a body, and it's kind of like this desert location. It kind of gave me some Murder Lust vibes from 1985. It definitely kind of following in that vein. So a lot of times it's bizarre. So we follow the killer around a lot, but he's wearing a lot of disguises. It took me a long time to realize which actor actually was the killer, and I was like, oh, that's where that actor is in here. Pretty cool. So there's like a couple of the deaths even before you really get a great look at the guy, but it also follows a police detective and his partner. His partner's actually the kind of, I guess you would say, passive guy in The Hills Have Eyes. That's kind of interesting. He's in here as a cop. And of course, with these police procedural kind of horror films, there's always going to be some humor with the cops. It doesn't necessarily land. You've seen much worse, but it's mediocre. But as the movie goes on, you kind of get to know the killer. They kind of plot this scheme with the psychiatrist. And the cop is obviously an angry fellow dealing with this. And it's so funny, like in the 70s, they just have a lot of the main characters, and like they're not portrayed as too bad, but he's just having not an open, but he's having an affair, like almost out in the broad daylight on his wife and everything. But Killer's Delight, I was okay with it. There's times when it does feel like a TV movie, and I don't mean that as an insult, because you go 70s and 80s TV movies are a little bit different of a beast than the 90s and 2000s TV movies. But for the most part, Killer's Delight is a worthy kind of mean-spirited kind of like I wouldn't even say proto-slasher, kind of slasher police procedural. The pictures that are taken, like they have these like black and white pictures that are taken on the crime scene. They show those add kind of a realistic effect. They seem a little bit grueling. Remind me like they would come from something like Naked Massacre, which I think is a better movie though. But Killer's Delight, check it out if it sounds like it's up your alley. As far as the features are concerned, we have a commentary track with director Jeremy Hoenack, new interview with Hoenack, new interview with writer Marlon Toma, new interview with cinematographer Arthur R. Bonin, new interview with actor Martin Spear, and that's the guys from The Hills Have Eyes. So check it out if it sounds like it's up your alley. Killer's Delight. Alright, so obviously the news last week of William Friedkin dying, legendary director, did a lot of great films, including The Exorcist, which is one of the most iconic horror films ever made. Did some other horror films in The Guardian, and I consider Cruising a horror film, which I love. He also did The French Connection, and he did this one, which is a very popular movie. It gained a cult following. It's from 1977. I had actually never seen it, and I heard so many people talk about it for so many years. I said, well, this is the one that I'm going to watch by William Friedkin to kind of make up and kind of pay my respects to him. This is Sorcerer, starring Roy Scheider. It also has, what's the actor in here? Bruno Kramer, Francisco Rabal. Okay, this guy is in like 188 movies. He pops up in Stuart Gordon's Dagon. He pops up in like every the movie in that kind of vein, and he's great in this. So this movie is excellent. I loved it. Obviously, I knew it's one movie I've just been putting off forever. It follows a story of kind of like 4 down on their luck, more than down on their luck, desperate as hell. This is a movie where it's like desperate guys on a mission with nothing to lose, and they're gonna put them through the meat grinder, and they look like they're on location, really going through the fucking meat grinder. You know what I mean? Like, they just don't make actors like this anymore, man. Try to get actors to do this. So essentially, we kind of follow 4 storylines in the very beginning. You see who these 4 characters are all around the different globe, and you know they're kind of gonna be the main characters after we kind of get a gist of what the hell's going on. So Roy Scheider is this kind of guy who's involved with an accident. They all owe people money, or they all are being looked at by somebody, so they end up in South America. And actually, the guy who sends Roy Scheider away is actually, the guy, Randy Jurgensen? He plays the cop. He's actually was a cop. He helps on a lot of the Friedkin movies. He helps on Lustig's movies. He's in Maniac. He's in Cruisin'. So you'll recognize him right away. So he helps Roy Scheider get the hell out of Dodge, and he ends up in South America. And he's working on this beat down, like, this mine. Like this oil rig. And it's just so trashy and in the middle of nowhere. And he recognizes a couple of, foreigners there. There's an Arab guy in there who did some unspeakable things. And then there's Francisco Rabal, and there's this Frenchman who we know owes a lot of money. So, like, all these people are either disgraced or they're on the run. They're on the lam. So, they all have fake passports. But they basically what happens is somebody attacks this oil refinery, and they need this nitroglycerin that has been stored like 200 miles away from the oil refinery. But the problem is they need that to blow the whole area out and start over, right? But that nitroglycerin is old and it already started sweating. And if anybody knows about that stuff, just the slightest touch that can ignite it. There's a Hammer movie, The Lost Continent, where they have nitroglycerin on the boat, and everybody freaks out about it because it can just blow up at any fucking second, right? It's very touchy. So they basically test for the best drivers around, and which is a very fun cameo with Joe Spinell in there. Of course, he wants to go, but they kind of get it down to 4, and the 4 people that go are not exactly the 4 that get picked. But we got, of course, Roy Scheider, the Frenchman, the Arab guy, and then, of course, Francisco Rabal. And I will say about this movie, it's 2 hours long, 2 hours and 1 minute. It's a remake of Wages of Fear by Clement, the guy who did, of course, Diabolique, which is a great film. But I never saw Wages of Fear. But I was watching this movie about them transporting nitroglycerin through a jungle and having to go across a rickety-ass bridge. On the edge of my seat, it's everything in this movie. You feel the desperation of the guys. You feel the commitment to the actors, to the material, and to the location, and all this kind of stuff. But I was on the edge of my seat. Maybe it's the Tangerine Dream score. Maybe it's just that the actors or anything there felt real danger. Edge of my seat, and completely enthralled by watching these guys that probably are not great guys try to get this truck with nitroglycerin across this area. And I was like, it's so nerve-wracking. And it's funny when you compare it to modern movies. They'll end the world 37 times in the same movie and you feel nothing. But this movie's so personal and just so scary, and you kind of have had that dread or that hopelessness in your body before, and it comes back in this one, watching this one. And there's certain points where, like, the characters crack up. One character completely just starts laughing hysterically, and it's brilliant. I love that. Roy Scheider is a great actor. It's so hard to find a replacement for him. I feel like he's kind of one of a kind, his look and his demeanor and everything like that. But I loved Sorcerer. I'm glad I finally watched it. I need to check off a couple more William Friedkin movies because he's an excellent director. Okay, so I decided to have a Roy Scheider double feature. This one is directed by John Badham, and I'd never seen this one. It has a great cast. It has Daniel Stern, Roy Scheider, Warren Oates, Candy Clark, and of course Malcolm McDowell. And this is Blue Thunder, same director of Dracula, the one from 1979 with Frank Langella and Laurence Olivier and Donald Pleasance. That's a really good one. But Blue Thunder. So I've heard about this one before, and there's actually a part in the trailer that cracks me up where somebody says, not bad, ratio. He's like, yeah, unless you're one of the ones, basically talking about getting killed by this helicopter. So Roy Scheider was a Vietnam vet, and he saw some messed up things, of course. And it's funny because the Sorcerer, at the end of Sorcerer, he kind of loses his shit too. I was like, is there any movie where Roy Scheider doesn't kind of have a meltdown? He even starts having meltdowns in like Jaws 2, I think. But it's it's just like Roy Scheider always having fucking meltdowns. The meltdown king. He's good at it. So he basically, I'm comparing a Vietnam vet flashback to a meltdown. That's probably insensitive. I didn't mean that. But it is movies, so it's exaggerated completely or just not accurate, most likely. But so Roy Scheider, now he is a helicopter pilot for the police, and they are testing out this new badass thing called the Blue Thunder. And one of the guys behind the program is Malcolm McDowell. They know each other. They don't like each other. The young buck partner of Roy Scheider is, of course, Daniel Stern. Even before fucking Chud, he's young here. He's handsome. So basically, if on their typical route, they go and spy on this woman who's naked doing stretches, really gratuitous, gross scene in 1982, but expected, right? I'm not really complaining. That's just a product of its time, but you know exactly. The voyeur in the movies is kind of a not a thing anymore, right? The peeping toms and the drunk drivers. That's not cute anymore. The heroes don't do that kind of shit anymore, or they try not to. But so essentially, they kind of show them the ropes on this new Blue Thunder, which is an intense plane. It's a military style plane, and he's supposed to be the guinea pig and drive around on it and everything. But he decides that this plane has so many technology and all these abilities that he starts to kind of spy on the people who set the program up and realize that they're no good and they be behind some crimes that are typically happening in an area. So yes, of course, it is everybody versus Roy Scheider in this badass helicopter. It's like the real life. It's like the fake fictional story of what was that guy who had made that giant battle tank or something, and he just crashed into a bank. He didn't kill anyone, but the police eventually had to shoot him, or he killed himself. I can't remember what it was. He basically kind of that, right? Roy Scheider, or the Gauntlet or some shit. With Eastwood, if I remember correctly, he kind of goes against everything. But he's in this helicopter, and everything comes together. I should mention one of my all-time favorite actors, if not my favorite character actor, Warren Oates, is the Chief. And he's got tons of great dialogue and chewing these guys out as a chief should. Unfortunately, this was one of the last movies he made. He died shortly after. He did this, Tough Enough, and Stripes around the same time. And I don't know which one he shot last, but it's one of Warren Oates' last movies, so R.I.P. Entertaining film. I really enjoyed it. I would recommend checking it out if nobody's ever seen Blue Thunder. It's a good action movie, too. And when people get shot and they do all that kind of stuff in the action, it's really violent, really over the top, really much a product of its time. That's Blue Thunder. I enjoyed it. All right, guys, let's get to those 1981 movies.
Woe be unto him who opens one of the 7 gateways to hell, because through that gateway, evil will invade the world.
on a Valentine's Day is a curse that'll live on and on. And no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago. In this little town, when the 14th comes round, there's a silence and fear in the air. Remember the morn that the legend was born, all the shock and the horror was there. Oh, the legend, they say, on a Valentine's Day is a curse that'll live on and on. And no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago. And no one will know as the years come and go of the horror from long time ago.
Okay, the first one from 1981 is from this box set here, and I'm going to mispronounce the director's name. Obayashi's 80s Kadokawa years, which this is the director of Houseu, and he had some of these 80s like sci-fi movies, and of course I'm talking about the sci-fi movie. It's more sci-fi than horror. School in the Crosshairs, aka The AIM School, and this is a really bizarre film, but it does share some similarities to another 1981 movie that I watched, The Midnight Offerings, where they kind of have this showdown in here. So this is a bizarre film. Jeremy saw part of it and he said this reminds him of live action Sailor Moon before Sailor Moon in a lot of aspects. So I don't know how to go about this weirdo movie. Very sci-fi. This character, this young girl, she has this guy she likes and everything, and he is in the fencing, and the school is big in the fencing, and one day he's losing and she just freezes his opponent, and he ends up winning. And everybody's a little confused what happened, but they're very happy that they won. So she tried to tell everyone that she has these magical powers, but no one really buys it. And there's also this alien character that's coming into the aspect from space. And what is a movie with a character who has special powers who doesn't have a villain? So we have this villain come in, and she wants to run for student council. And obviously we have this high school drama meets this high stakes kind of superpower battle within the school. There's lots of weird glowing eye deals. They put like contacts in the eyes. There is some weird, like, I guess, like borderline horror moments, but it's just such a genre film, and by a director who's famous for making kind of weird, bizarre genre films, that I kind of wanted to include it in the 1981 movies. Because I don't just do horror, I'll do cult movies and some sci-fi and some crazy thrillers and iconic stuff. I kind of do all that when it comes to like doing a year, because anything that could be horror considered horror adjacent as well. I did enjoy this one. It had some really good visuals, had some good gags. It's very much a cute comedy movie, even though Houseu has its cute moments too, but then it's super dark moments and just out of this world shit. This has similarities to it, but I would say it's a little bit different. It's not as dark or as good. I do think Houseu is pretty much close to a masterpiece after watching it a couple times, but this one I do enjoy is School Girl in the Crosshairs, or School in the Crosshairs if I'm not mistaken. I would recommend checking it out. Can't wait to watch the other stuff. The other ones are all from like 83, 84, and like I think 87. Let me just double check. It's right here. 83, 84, and 86. So, yeah. Anyways, I'm looking forward to watching more of his films in the future. Okay, what can I say about this next one here? It's a freaking masterpiece, and this is a revenge film, a rape revenge film, and I do consider this one horror. I don't think Letterboxd or Net Movie Database do, but this one just feels horror to me, and it always had. And this is Miss 45 by Abel Ferrara, starring Zoe Lunn and maybe a couple other familiar faces in here, one of which being the director himself, and a really gross cameo. I don't know if you call that a cameo. Maybe just no one else wanted to do it. But this is from the Alamo Draft House. This is long out of print. They really need to pick this up. I would love if Vinegar Syndrome picked up Miss 45, because this is one of my favorite films. One of my favorite rape revenge films ever made, probably behind Ice Speed on Your Grave, Last House on the Left, House on the Edge of the Park, these movies kind of deal. I love those movies, but Miss 45 is right up there with them, and Thriller, A Cruel Picture. They're all like the top tier for me. I don't mean like they're just insane. But Miss 45 follows the story of Zoe Lund, or Zoe Tamarellis, I think is her real name. And when she made this, she was like 17, 18 years old. She's very, very young. And she's a mute, and she works on dresses in the fashion design show. And on the way home, it's a very loud world and everything, a very New York world, you can tell. This director always films his stuff in New York, from Driller Killer to King of New York to Bad Lieutenant, all these kind of movies that are just really excellent and entertaining. So what happens is she's raped by Abel Ferrara on the way home. It's a really brutal, nasty scene. It's very quick, which seems realistic. And she gets home, and basically, she's ready to relax and sit down, and they pull an I Spit on Your Grave with her, right? There's been a burglar who broke into her house, and he also rapes her. She gets the better of him and gets his 45 and takes him out. As the film progresses, you kind of see that the third person that she kills is almost a borderline accident. But after that, she starts to go out and search for them, a la Charles Bronson, Death Wish fashion. They'd make a match, a crazy match, right? 2 words spoken between both of them, and one can't speak. That's just basically their relationship. So anyways, she starts to go out and kill men at randomly. A lot of them are muggers and thieves in that Death Wish fashion, but there's a couple high rollers in there, and at one point, she kills people that might not have it coming. The very end of this movie takes place at a brilliant Halloween party, and the ending just breaks my heart. If anybody's seen my opening, and you'll notice the beautiful nun, is Zoe Lun. How she's dressed, she looks so awesome in here. It's just the idea of, a nun with a gun is just such a beautiful idea, right? So she basically has this crazy scene at the end, which is super iconic, and I love what it implies, right? And you genuinely do feel really bad for Zoe Lund. There's a strange kind of not side plot, but there's a character in here, the landlady, who's constantly yelling at Zoe Lund, "Where you going? What you doing?" Getting in her business, of course, that nosy New York neighbor, because they live on top of each other kind of deal. Anyways, Miss 45 is excellent. As far as the special features are concerned, we have interview with director Abel Ferrara, composer Joe D'Elia, and creative consultant Jack McIntyre. Zoe XO and Zoe Rising, 2 short films on Star Zoe Lund by American hardcore director Paul Radman. Trailer, 32 booklet, all that kind of stuff. I love the Abel Ferrara interview because he's candid. He never fucking bullshits. I mean, he tells it straight up every time. And he basically tells her that she showed up and she was brilliant. She could speak 5 languages. And then by the time she was, 20-something years old, early 20s, she was a 1-a-day heroin addict, 1-a-day user of heroin. And it's just fucked up. It's sad. And her story is really sad, She helped contribute to a great film, and she's in there, and it's just good stuff. Excellent movie, great soundtrack too, very memorable soundtrack. I love this movie. I think it fits in there at the same time as, you could say, I Spit on Your Grave or Death Wish. It's kind of a meet in the middle kind of deal, if you will. But Miss 45, excellent film, love it. Okay, the next one from 1981 is from the BBC, and this is The Nightmare Man. And this is another miniseries, right? Since I was so happy with The Day of the Triffids, I decided to pop in one of their other miniseries from this year, and this is The Nightmare Man. And I had not really heard much about this one, so I start watching it, and at first I'm like, this is fun, this is cool. It takes place in an isolated island, and something kind of strange happens. Someone is found, this poor woman has disappeared, and she's found murdered. And the murder, the way the person is murdered is very baffling. They're like, well, these are very sharp. It looks like she was strangled, but they kind of realize that there's teeth marks and stuff, and this couldn't be from something human. So we have a dentist who's not a mainland. He hasn't lived on here forever. He's a mainlander originally, but he's kind of courting a woman who grew up on here, and they're in love. So that's kind of 2 of the main characters there. We also kind of get introduced to the police chief and his sergeant. His sergeant's played by James Cosmo, who is in stuff like Stormy Monday. He's in a slew of things. He's a red-haired guy, big mustache. You'd recognize him if you'd seen him. But he's in there as well, and they all kind of start to work on this case. There's also a colonel, a strange kind of colonel who appears, and these murders start taking place. You're like, he's kind of related. He's a red herring kind of deal. But as it progresses, a couple more people disappear. There's missing sheep. And I was really digging it until we get to the final act, and it turns less horror, more sci-fi, but that's okay too. But it just kind of turns really clunky in comparison to the first 2 acts set up, I think. And the payoff is not exactly worth it. It's not gratuitously gory, but there is some cool ideas about it. Nightmare Man is okay. I would give it a slight recommend. If you're into BBC movies, then you could do a lot worse. It's fine. Okay, the Patreon pick this week, is it Chris Rivers or Jim Simon? It is The Last Castle from 2010 or something around that time. And this stars Robert Redford, James Gandolfini. Who else pops up in here? Clifton Collins, Paul Calderon. I know there's a bunch of other people I'm probably just missing. Robin Wright. I know there's a couple more that are just leaving my head here. It also has the guy. He played I can't think of the movie, so I shouldn't even reference this. But there's this good movie that Arrow put out, a contemporary movie about this kind of sleepwalking man that every time he woke up he was death or something. It's a very bizarre movie, but he's in here as well. So what we have here is Robert Redford is this disgraced general. He has a bunch of medals. Oh, Delroy Lindo is also in here. He has a bunch of medals. He's just beloved by everybody in the military. He broke command, and he ends up getting sentenced here in this place, this high security prison ran by James Gandolfini, who's excellent all the time. And at first, Gandolfini has a lot of respect for the man, but Robert Redford lets kind of his mouth slip off and says something about people, military men that collect trophies from the war never really saw war. And you can kind of understand what he's getting at, right? People that romanticize or think war in America is such a beautiful thing, state of things like that when it comes to like the patriotic side in a wartime. Don't have the respect for the war that he does because he's seen it firsthand. You know what I mean? That kind of scariness, that kind of, sadness of losing your men and everything. So they kind of butt heads immediately. Now, James Gandolfini doesn't let him realize it, but Robert Redford says he wants to keep his head down and just do his time. That's not what's going to happen, right? He starts to realize as the unjust things are happening to a lot of these prisoners, people being beaten, people kind of neglected basic human needs to survive, all these kind of things. So Robert Redford starts to stir the pot a little bit and try to bring in some outside, help. It gets, of course, as you'd expect, what kind of prison movie doesn't end with some sort of prison riot? So there's that, and it's pretty intense. And you like how the unit starts to work together again, how these soldiers were once soldiers. I'm not talking about that movie, but they kind of come back together and start trying to stand up against James Gandolfini. But everybody's really solid in it. Paul Calderon plays an ex-staff sergeant. He's solid in it. I enjoy the movie, and I would recommend it. The Last Castle. Now, not everybody thinks it's amazing or anything like that, but I think that Mark Ruffalo's in here. I should definitely mention Mark Ruffalo because he's really good in it, and it's an early role for him as well. But I would recommend this one. It's fun. I enjoyed it, and Redford's got a good demeanor. Of course, he was a movie star for a reason. Okay, comments, concerns, and all that jazz. Ken Coakley. I went on a Burt Reynolds kick a few months ago. He did a couple of comedies that I liked. One film was Starting Over, which was filmed in my home state of Massachusetts. In fact, the scenes where he went to see his brother, Charles Durning, were shot in my old neighborhood. The other comedy and my favorite Burt movie was The End. Burt plays a guy trying to commit suicide after being told that he's dying of a rare blood disease. Dom DeLuise steals the show, and Robbie Benson was hilarious as a young priest. I also love The Longest Yard. It's much better than the remake. Switching gears to David Warner, you mentioned Cross of Iron and Ballad of Cable Hogue, which were both directed by Sam Peckinpah. I know, I covered both of them. They did another one called Straw Dogs, which I liked a lot. Warner did a movie I liked called Time After Time, in which he played Jack the Ripper let loose in 1979 San Francisco. I covered all those movies on the show. Yeah, Time After Time also has Malcolm McDowell as Sherlock Holmes, but Straw Dogs is the classic. He's uncredited in Straw Dogs. David Warner did not take credit. Probably didn't want the rapist or the weird kind of character he was on his resume. Now for Brian Bosworth movie recommendations. He has since become a born-again Christian and does faith-based films, and this was one of them. He was in the first film of a trilogy called Revelation Road. He plays the leader of an outlaw motorcycle gang that stalks the main character. It takes place during the rapture, and they're all left behind. First film stars Bosworth, Steve Borden, a.k.a. Sting the Pro Wrestler, Ray Wise, Eric Roberts, and David A.R. White as the protagonist. The first film is the Mad Max, and the other two films are similar to Road Warrior. It's going to be a series on Pure Flix this fall with Bosworth returning. Oh, it sounds interesting. I Am Tragos. David Hemmings is a genre icon. His excellence in Fragments of Fear deserves a special mention. That it does. From 1970, he's very good in that movie. Nick Mua. He's also excellent in 1973's Voices, a must-see for haunted house fans. I have that, not watched Voices yet. Bad Brains Horror. Hey, Dave, really enjoyed Savage Harvest. The behind-the-scenes stuff from Muldoon Drive-In is amazing. Always wanted to check out the Eric Stanzi film. Cannibal Campout looks like a must-buy. Great episode. Yeah, Eric Stanzi's early stuff's really good. Ice from the Sun is great. Savage Harvest is great. Scrapbook is rough stuff. All his later stuff's good, too. Zach Nolan, do you remember any movie trailers that scared you as a kid? The Believers creeped me out back in the day, but I don't recall the movie being that great. I remember Believers being solid. I don't remember the trailer for The Believers, though. Any movie trailers that creep me out, I'm sure there were, honestly, but I love that kind of stuff, so I'd probably watch it on repeat if I could at the time. Excellent. Explosive Action. Glad to hear the review of Demon Rat. I was really curious, but it sounded quite bland and not up there with the director's other films. Yeah, the director's other movies are much better, but Demon Rat might be kind of okay if you get it on sale. Callan Wilkins, looking sharp today, Mr. Parker. Thank you. Movie Junkie Reviews 84. I just watched Cannibal Campout again. A decent SOV. I think it's a little better for SOV. It's a decent horror movie. It's a great SOV. If that makes any sense, I'm sure it does. Ilk Vomit 88. How are you going to see the new Fist of Fury before Fist of Fury? On a side note, that essential Billy Kong. On a side note, the essential Billy Kong Kong flu flick to watch is Superpower. Also, let me cash up you $20 so you can rectify these Bruce Lee blind spots. Stat. I should watch them. I know. Nick Mua. Mr. Parker endorsing a TV miniseries. Now I just have to check it out if the series is a true source of material as Village of the Damned was. I'm sure to enjoy it. Questions. Do haunted technology, aka Ghosts and Machines movies, frighten you at all? There's a new one called Dear David on the horizon, hence this question. I'm not overly fond of the said subgenre myself, though I like the premise of Fear.com. No, I think that they don't exactly scare me, but there's ones that kind of get to you, like Pulse. The original Japanese version took a couple watches, and then when you think about it, it is kind of disturbing, kind of sad. Ghost in the computer that can kind of move, but it's also kind of losing your humanity to technology, which is happening now. As far as Ghost in the Machine movies, I mean, you have like there's a lot of those kind of deals. I know Demon Seed has that kind of aspect, but the idea that technology involved in horror and involved in like kind of that kind of stuff is always there. I mean, Hisayasu Sato used technology in all his films, and the Japanese films in general kind of use a lot of technology and even Ghost within that technology. But I remember the movie Ghost in the Machine has been years. But you know, I think it is kind of an interesting subgenre because obviously we're going to have a lot of sentient, I don't need to say sentient, but intelligent kind of computers and stuff like that. Machines. Which is your favorite Nightbreed cut? Don't you wish Mr. Barker would direct another movie? I would love to direct another movie. See, I like the theatrical. Now, I'm not saying it's. I do think it flows better. I think the editing is better for obvious reasons. I mean, if you would have gave Clive Barker and let him do whatever he wanted when Nightbreed was initially made, that movie would even be better than theatrical or director's cut now, or extended cut, or Cabal cut, whatever the fuck. All the different cuts. But as it stands now, I think the theatrical flows better. I don't think any of the dialogue or any of the music comes across clunky. In the director's cut, I think that the priest comes across as a terrible actor, while in the theatrical version, he's fine. Ashbury. There's just lots of things about the theatrical cut, the cues, and they fit up with the music better, and just it flows better. Maybe in story-wise, some people prefer the director's cut. Maybe it's closer to Cabal than novella, but I prefer the theatrical, and I always will. It's just and I like the ending better. So what else do we have? 3. Name your favorite Rudyonda Alda horror performance. I'm torn between Girls' Night Out and Amityville 2. Take care till next week, God willing. That's not an actress I keep on memory, to be honest. I'd have to see her. I'm sorry. Which character does she play in Girls' Night Out and Amityville 2? Mike Moore. Okay. Okay, Mike Moore, Kelly's Heroes is great and agree the theme song is fantastic. Movie Junkie 84, it's in my war movie collection, good one for sure, love it. And then Mike Moore replies, not in the same vein, but another great Eastwood war movie is Where Eagles Dare, great story and amazing sets, a true underrated classic if you ask me. Fat Pig the Conqueror, I hated Zombie Light 2, I'll give it another go. I'm not saying it's the next coming, but man, it's pretty okay in comparison to some of the shit I watched. Stephen Lapierre, how come you haven't watched any of the Air 4444 releases? Centipede Horror, Red Spells, Warped Forest. I am going to. I know a couple of those are 82, so when I get to that, I'll dive into those. But I have a bunch of them. I bought all the ones that came out so far. I didn't get a chance to buy their newest one, but I'll wait for retail on that. But it's just time. And then we have Stephen Hyde, gives me a smile and a muscle up. I appreciate it, guys, and there's no update this time around, which is kind of a bummer, but I have a couple other things coming in the mail, so you guys take care. Alright, guys, thank you very much for watching, and as always, have a good one.